The figure of Grant Dawson stood alone against the blaze of the Wyoming sunset, his rough hands gripping a fence post, as if it were the only thing keeping him steady. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The year was 1875, and at 38 he had long accepted the silence of a solitary life on the Double B. Yet the letter in his pocket weighed heavier than the colt on his hip. An answer to an ad he had foolishly placed months ago, one he'd nearly forgotten until this very day. He dragged a hand through his dark hair, streaked silver too early for his age. The war had taken its share, but the fever that swept the frontier 7 years back had stolen the rest: his wife, Annabelle, their baby boy, Noah, and with them any chance of happiness. The ranch, once meant for two, had become a place of penance. Boss came the gravelly voice of Harlan Briggs, his ranch hand. Mail just came in from Clearwater, something from back east. Grant nodded, but his gut tightened as he took the envelope. The seal read, Boston, Massachusetts, a world as far from him as the moon. Inside, the handwriting was delicate, refined, the sort of script that belonged to city folk. Mr. Dawson, my name is Lila Monroe. I am answering your advertisement for a wife. I'll be arriving in Clearwater on May 12th via the Western Pacific Line. I am 24, unmarried, and ready to take on the duties of a rancher's wife. Respectfully, Lila Monroe. Grant's chest tightened. May 12th, tomorrow. He cursed under his breath. That advertisement had been a foolish indulgence written on a bitter winter night when loneliness howled louder than the wind against his walls. You all right, boss? Harlan asked, brows raised. She's coming tomorrow. Grant muttered, his voice dry. Who's she? My wife. Harlan nearly dropped his hat. Married. When the hell did that happen? It hasn't. Not yet. I put out an ad for a mail-order bride months ago, forgot all about it. But she's on her way. Harlan let out a long whistle. Well, I'll be damned, after swearing you'd never tie the knot again. Grant folded the letter, tucking it back in his vest. I'm not marrying her. I can't. I'll ride to town tomorrow, give her fare to head back east, and apologize for the mess. Yet even as he said it, something long dormant flickered inside him, a curiosity about the kind of woman who would cross the continent to wed a stranger. By morning, Grant rode toward Clearwater, his stomach knotted with unease. The town had grown in recent years thanks to the railroad, but the edges still carried the raw grit of the frontier. When the train whistle shrieked across the valley, he tied his horse outside the depot and stepped up onto the wooden platform. He brushed dust from his worn vest, suddenly too aware of his appearance. The iron wheels screeched, steam hissing as the locomotive rolled in. A crowd gathered, businessmen in pressed suits, a family shepherding children, and then she appeared. Lila Monroe stepped carefully down, a gloved hand resting on the conductor's arm. Her blue traveling dress was modest, her chestnut hair tucked beneath a small hat. Not a beauty by city standards, yet there was something striking. Maybe the firmness of her chin, maybe the spark in her hazel eyes. When those eyes met his, Grant felt a jolt he hadn't known in years. She strode straight toward him. Mr. Dawson, she said, with calm certainty, her Eastern accent faint, but clear. He removed his hat awkwardly. Miss Monroe, welcome to Wyoming Territory. She extended her hand. He took it clumsily. Thank you for meeting me. My trunk and 2 cases are still on board. Miss Monroe. His rehearsed words faltered. There's been a mistake. I wrote that advertisement during poor judgment. I'm not looking for a wife. If she was shaken, she didn't show it. Only the faintest tightening at her lips betrayed anything. I see, she said evenly. I crossed 2,000 miles on your word, Mr. Dawson. I know, and I'm sorry. I'll pay your way back and see you compensated. She straightened her shoulders. And if I don't wish to return, Grant blinked. Excuse me. I didn't come to Wyoming simply to wed. I came for a new life. If you don't want to keep your word, that's your choice. But I won't be heading east. For the first time, Grant glimpsed the iron beneath her polite exterior. This country's dangerous for a woman alone. I know. And I'll face it. My mind is made up. Before he could reply, shouts rang out near the station. The crash of glass and angry voices broke through the hum of the platform. 3 rough trail hands had cornered Jonah Reeves, the station clerk, barking demands with whiskey on their breath. Trouble, Grant muttered, stepping instinctively in front of Lila. Stay here. He walked toward the fray with the steady stride of a man who'd seen battle. That's enough, Grant said, his voice cutting sharp as a blade. This ain't the place. The largest of the 3 turned a scar running across his face, rage burning through the liquor. Mind your business, stranger. I just did, Grant replied, his hand hovering near his Colt, not drawn but ready. The clerk seized the moment to dash inside and slam the door. The drunk men turned their fury on Grant. You cost us our fun, the scarred man snarled, reaching for his pistol. What followed happened so fast the folks on the platform never could agree on the details. One of the drunks yanked for his gun, but Grant Dawson moved quicker, his revolver clearing leather in one smooth motion. The shot cracked, and the scarred man stumbled back, clutching his bleeding shoulder. The other 2, Clyde Dobbs and Vernon Tate, sobering quick at the sight of blood, threw up their hands. We don't want no more trouble, one muttered, hauling their wounded friend upright. Get him to a doctor, Grant ordered, holstering his Colt. And stay out of Clearwater until you learn how to act like men. As the trio limped off, Grant turned and found Lila Monroe standing closer than he'd expected, pale but steady on her feet. You all right? He asked. Yes, she breathed. Then, with a flicker of admiration, that was impressive. That was unfortunate, he corrected flatly. But that's the West. This is what happens out here. All the more reason I shouldn't face it alone, she replied, voice calm as steel. Mr. Dawson, she said firmly, let's strike a bargain. Let me stay on your ranch as a housekeeper, not a wife. I'll cook clean, earn my keep until I decide my path. In return, I ask only for a bed, meals, and fair wages. Grant studied her, expecting to find fear after what she'd just seen. Instead, her hazel eyes met his without flinching. Against his better judgment, a reluctant respect stirred in him. It's a hard life, he warned. I'm stronger than I look. After a long pause, he nodded. 1 month. Then we'll see. Relief softened her expression, though only for a heartbeat. Shall we fetch my luggage? Then I'd like to see this ranch of yours. The wagon ride to the Double B took most of the afternoon. Grant had come prepared, expecting trunks, and the first hour passed in stiff silence. Lila sat upright beside him, eyes fixed on the endless stretch of land. It's beautiful, she finally said, as the wagon crested a rise, revealing a wide valley bathed in light. Not what I imagined, but beautiful all the same. What did you expect? Grant asked, almost curious. Desert mostly. The books back east always spoke of sand and cactus. That's further south. Here we've got prairies and mountains. Good grazing land. Winters'll bite, though. She nodded, drinking it in. And your ranch? How big is it? 3,000 acres. Not the largest, but enough. You manage it all alone? I've got Harlan Briggs, been with me 5 years, and Mateo Delgado tends the horses. I'll hire extra hands come round up. As for the house... Grant shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. Not since his voice caught. Not for a long time. Understanding lit her face. You were married before. He gave a curt nod, unwilling to say more. She spoke softly. I lost my parents to influenza 3 years back. I know what grief is, Mr. Dawson. Grant, he said after a beat. "If you're staying at my ranch, you might as well use my name." "Grant," she repeated gently, then added, "And I'm Lila, though some call me Penny." The wagon topped another hill, and the Double B came into view, a sturdy 2-story house with a broad porch, a barn, and outbuildings scattered under the shade of cottonwoods. A creek ran silver in the late sun. "It's lovely," Lila murmured, genuine warmth in her voice. "It needs work," Grant admitted, though her approval stirred something in him. "North side needs new siding. Roof leaks when it rains. Every home needs tending," she answered simply. As they pulled up, Harlan Briggs stepped from the barn, surprise flickering across his weathered face at the sight of her. "Miss Monroe will be staying," Grant said as he helped her down. "She'll be managing the house." Harlan recovered quick, tipping his hat. "Ma'am, welcome to the Double B." "Thank you, Mr. Just Harlan, ma'am." "No Mr. needed." "Then I'm Lila," she said warmly. "A pleasure." Grant carried her trunk inside, oddly self-conscious, as he opened the front door. The main room was plain but neat. A sturdy table, 4 chairs, a stone fireplace, and little else beyond a rifle mounted over the mantel. "The kitchen's through there," he said, gesturing. "Pantry's stocked as best as we can manage. Upstairs 3 bedrooms. Take the one at the end, it gets the morning sun." Lila's eyes moved keenly over the room. "May I see the kitchen?" He led her in, watching as she inspected the cast-iron stove, the hand pump, the jars of preserves lining the shelves. "This will do just fine," she said with quiet confidence. "I'll have supper ready shortly." "You don't have to start today," Grant said, suddenly aware of her long journey. "I like to set routines early," she replied. "Besides, we all have to eat, don't we?" That first meal set the tone for the days ahead. She proved capable and steady, reshaping the bachelor's quarters with a woman's touch, meals at proper hours, fresh wildflowers on the table, curtains hung to soften the bare windows. The ranch house began to feel less like a shell and more like a home again. Grant felt the changes sharply, each one a reminder of what he had once lost. He kept his distance, leaving at dawn, working until dusk, eating in silence. But Lila Monroe was not so easily shaken. Every day she asked about the land, the cattle, the West itself. Her questions carried genuine interest, not idle chatter. One evening after supper, they sat on the porch. The sunset turned the mountains gold. "Have you always been a rancher?" she asked. "No," Grant answered quietly. "I was a soldier once. Union Army." The war changed near everything Lila Monroe said softly. "It did," Grant Dawson replied. He paused, then admitted, "I met my wife during those years. She was a nurse working a field hospital where I was laid up after a wound." Lila stayed quiet, giving him space. "Her name was Anna Bell," he said at last, the words heavy but easier than he expected. "We married in '63, headed west once the fighting ended. We built this place together. She must have been a courageous woman." She was Grant's voice caught. "Braver than me in more ways than I care to count." "What happened?" Lila asked gently. "Fever. 7 years back. Took her and our boy Noah. He was 4 months old." Lila's hand twitched toward his arm, then fell back. "I'm sorry, Grant. Truly." He nodded, uneasy with her sympathy, but strangely lighter for having spoken. "You mentioned your parents," he said, after a moment. "Any kin left back east? An aunt in Philadelphia, Evelyn Crow, but we were never close. I worked as a school teacher after my parents died until—" Her voice trailed off, eyes gone distant. "Until what?" The superintendent had his own ideas about my future. "When I refused his advances, my job ended. Your advertisement seemed heaven-sent." Anger stirred in Grant, thinking of some pompous man forcing her into desperation. No one will trouble you that way here. I know, she said simply. I knew it the first day we met. Her confidence sparked something in him, pride maybe, or an old instinct to protect one he thought was buried. As May slipped into June, the rhythm of ranch life set in. Grant and his men worked toward the summer cattle drive, while Lila became indispensable in the household. She even joined Rosa Delgado in the garden, planting vegetables Grant hadn't tasted in years. One evening, coming back from the north pasture, he spotted her on a blanket by the creek, reading. The sight stopped him cold. It was so peaceful, so homely, he reined in his horse just to look. She lifted her eyes at his approach, shading them from the sun. Good evening. Too fine a night to stay cooped up, she said. It's your home too, Grant blurted, then caught himself. I mean, while you're here. She smiled, closing her book. Care to sit? I brought lemonade. Against his better judgment, Grant tied his horse and lowered himself onto the blanket. He accepted the glass she offered. What are you reading, Emerson? Nature and other essays. Do you read not poetry? Mostly newspapers history when I can. I brought several books. You're welcome to borrow any. It was a simple offer, but it touched him. Thank you. I just might. They sat in silence, watching the creek. As dusk deepened, fireflies lit the air, twinkling like sparks in the twilight. I've never seen so many, Lila whispered delight in her voice. In Boston, maybe one or two. But this... They like the water, Grant said. On warm nights, the whole valley glows. Feels near magical. In that soft light with her wonder shining plain, she looked younger, less guarded. Grant found his eyes tracing the curve of her cheek, the fall of a loose strand of hair. She turned and caught him staring. Something passed between them, an unspoken pull neither dared name. He looked away, first clearing his throat. It's getting dark. We ought to head back. Yes, of course. She gathered her things, moving a bit too quickly. The walk home carried a quiet tension. At the porch steps, she paused. Grant... She hesitated. The month you gave me, it's nearly up. The words hit him like cold water. He'd nearly forgotten. You want to leave? He asked, sharper than he meant. No, she said quickly. I just wondered where we stand. Relief poured through him. Stay as long as you like. The place is yours. Her smile nearly stopped his heart. Thank you. I've grown fond of the Double B. Just the ranch. The words slipped before he could stop them. Color rose in her cheeks. Not just the ranch, she admitted, then hurried. Good night, Grant. He lingered on the porch long after she'd gone inside, shaken by how much her leaving troubled him. In barely a week, she'd become essential, like breath, like water. The thought terrified him. The next morning, he saddled his horse before breakfast, needing distance to sort through the tangle inside him. The cattle drive was close, 2 weeks away, and maybe the separation would clear his head. That evening, the house was unusually quiet. Instead of supper, he found a note on the kitchen table written in her neat hand. Gone to town with Rosa for supplies. Back by supper. L.R. relieved for the pause, he shaved, changed into a clean shirt, and was tugging on his boots when wagon wheels rattled outside. He stepped onto the porch as Mateo Delgado helped the women down. Lila was laughing at something Rosa said, her face lit up in a way he'd rarely seen. The sight made his chest tighten. You're back, she said, catching his eye. I was worried you might miss supper. Just finished checking the south herd, Grant Dawson replied, moving to help with the crates. Everything all right in town, yes, Lila Monroe said, though Caleb Thornton at the store wanted me to tell you. There's talk of rustlers near the Anderson spread. Grant's brow tightened. When did you hear this? This afternoon. Is it serious? Could be. He set down a sack of flour. I'll ride over tomorrow and see what Anderson has to say. As they carried supplies inside, Grant noticed extra bundles. What's all this? Lila exchanged a quick look with Rosa Delgado. Just a few things for the house, she admitted. I ordered fabric, thought I'd sew new curtains for the parlor. The old ones are worn. You don't need my permission for curtains, he said, puzzled. I didn't want to presume. It isn't really my home. It is, he countered, echoing his own words from the night before. For as long as you want it to be. The smile she gave him stirred something deep inside. Thank you. That means more than you know. That evening, after roast chicken and fresh bread far better than his usual fare, Grant found himself lingering at the table instead of slipping into silence. The cattle drive starts next week, he said, as she cleared dishes. I'll be gone near 2 weeks. Is it dangerous? She asked. It can be. Weather-swollen rivers rustlers' lots can go wrong. But I've done it before. Will Harlan Briggs go with you, Harlan, and 4 extra hands? Mateo Delgado stays to watch the horses and ranch. And you, of course. I'll be fine, she assured him. Rosa's promised to teach me how to make proper tortillas while you're gone. Just be careful. Keep the rifle by the door loaded. And Grant, she cut him off gently. I'll be careful. I promise. He nodded, embarrassed by his own protectiveness. I should check the horses before turning in. I'll leave a lamp burning for you, she said softly. Such a small gesture, but it hit him hard. Thank you, he murmured, tugging on his hat and stepping into the night. In the barn, as he walked the stalls, his mind circled back to Lila. In only weeks, she had reshaped not just the house, but parts of himself, he thought long buried. He found himself smiling more, speaking, more even sleeping easier with her under his roof. Yet with that comfort came fear, an old dread that happiness was only the prelude to loss. He'd learned that lesson too well with Annabelle and Noah. Could he risk his heart again? Did he even have the right when she'd come expecting a husband and ended up working his house like hired help? The questions gnawed at him as the days ticked down to the drive. He watched her more closely than he cared to admit, memorizing her voice, her way of moving the tilt of her head when she concentrated. If something happened on the trail, would she stay? Would she remember him kindly? The night before departure, after supper was cleared, Lila handed him a brown paper package. What's this? He asked, surprised. Open it? She urged, a trace of nerves in her tone. Inside was a shirt finer than any he owned and a knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes. I noticed your old scarf was fraying, she said quickly. Nights can be cold even in summer. I thought you might need something practical. Grant ran his fingers over the wool, deeply moved. You made this. She nodded. In the evenings after you'd gone to bed. It isn't perfect, but it's perfect, he cut in. Thank you, Lila. Truly. Their eyes met, and that current surged between them again. This time neither looked away. Grant, she whispered. A sharp knock cut her short. Harlan Briggs stood on the porch, hat in hand. Sorry to interrupt, boss, but we've got trouble. 2 horses missing from the south pasture. Signs of riders heading east. Grant was on his feet at once, the moment shattered. Rustlers. Saddle my horse, we'll ride while the trail's fresh. Grant, wait. Lila caught his arm as he reached for his gun belt. Be careful. Please. The honest worry in her eyes struck him. On impulse, he pressed her hand briefly. I will. Lock the doors behind me. The next hours blurred into hard riding and tension as Grant and Harlan tracked the thieves by moonlight. Near dawn, they found 3 men camped in a ravine with his horses and cattle branded Andersons. The fight was quick, but fierce. Gunfire echoed off stone as they traded shots with Dallas Rourke, Jasper Flint, and Boone Maddox. When the smoke cleared, one rustler lay dead, another was bleeding, and the third threw down his gun. "You're lucky," Grant told the surviving men as he bound their wrists. "In Clearwater, you'll get a trial. Further west, you'd already be hanging." Driving the stolen stock back, Harlan noticed blood soaking Grant's sleeve. "You're hit," he said. Grant glanced at the graze across his arm, only now feeling it. "It's nothing. Just a scratch." "Miss Monroe won't see it that way," Harlan said knowingly. Grant frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that she worries plenty over you. And you over her." "She works for me," Grant answered stiffly. "Her safety's my responsibility." "If you say so," Harlan muttered. "But in 7 years, I ain't seen you look at anyone the way you look at her." Grant said nothing, unsettled by the truth in his foreman's words. They reached the Double B just as the sun crested the horizon. Lila Monroe rushed from the house at the sound of Hoove's relief in her eyes, until she caught sight of Grant Dawson's blood-soaked sleeve. "You're hurt," she cried, reaching for him as he swung down from the saddle. "It's nothing," he said quickly, though she was already guiding him firmly toward the door. "Let me be the judge of that. Harlan, fetch hot water and the medicine kit from the barn." Inside, she sat him at the kitchen table, cutting away the torn fabric. The bullet had left a deep graze across his bicep. "This is what you call nothing?" she asked sharply, though her hands stayed steady as she cleaned the wound. "I've had worse shaving," he tried to joke. She didn't smile. "You could have been killed, but I wasn't. We brought back the horses. And Anderson's cattle, besides. The rustlers will face the judge in Clearwater." She worked in silence for a moment, her fingers careful as she spread salve and wrapped the bandage. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she whispered, "I was afraid of being left here alone, afraid of losing you." The words hung heavy, carrying more weight than she likely meant to reveal. Grant's heart pounded as he looked at her, saw the vulnerability, and something else, something that matched the storm he felt inside. Lila. He began unsure of what he meant to say, but the moment broke when Harlan returned with the supplies, followed by Mateo and Rosa Delgado, all full of questions. By the time Grant explained the skirmish and the stolen stock, the closeness he'd felt with Lila had slipped back behind her careful reserve. She carried herself with cool composure the rest of the day, though more than once he caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. That night, as he readied for bed, a knock came at his door. He opened it to find her holding a steaming cup. Tea. Willow bark for the pain. "Thank you," he said, their fingers brushing as he took it. "You should rest. It's been a long day." She lingered as if she wanted to say more, then nodded. "Good night, Grant. Good night." When her footsteps faded, Grant leaned his head against the doorframe torn in two. Her care. Her fear of losing him, it was more than employer and housekeeper, and he felt the same. But with the cattle drive just days away now, wasn't the time to give voice to it, not when he might not come back. The morning of departure dawned crisp. The yard buzzed with activity as the hands pushed the herd toward the open range. Lila had been up since before dawn, cooking breakfast and packing provisions. As Grant saddled his horse, she approached with a small parcel. "Food for the trail," she said, "and bandages for your arm." "Thank you." He tucked it into his saddlebags, then turned to face her. "Will you be all right while I'm gone?" "Of course. Mateo and Rosa will be here. I'll keep everything running." "Lila." He started struggling for words. "When I get back, I think we need to talk about arrangements," she asked, her smile dimming. "Yes. Your place here. Your future." He winced at how clumsy it sounded. Before she could reply, Harlan called from the corral. "Boss, we're ready to move out," Grant cursed under his breath. "I've got to go." "Yes." "Of course." Her tone shifted polite again. Safe travels, Mr. Dawson. The formality stung. Lila, she cut him off gently. We'll talk when you return. With a curt nod, he swung into the saddle. As the herd pushed east, he glanced back. She stood on the porch, one hand raised in farewell, morning sunlight, glowing around her like a painting burned into memory. The drive was harder than he'd expected. Torrential rains swelled the rivers, turning crossings deadly. One night, a bull snake spooked the horses, nearly starting a stampede, and always the shadow of rustlers hovered near the edges of camp. Through it all, Grant's thoughts returned to Lila, her smile, her quiet strength, the way she'd brought warmth back into his home. Every night, he pulled her knitted scarf around his neck. He told himself it was only for the cold, but he knew better. When they reached the railhead, the cattle fetched more than he'd hoped, but he cared little for profit. All he wanted was to get back to the double B to her. The return blurred by in his urgency. When they finally crested the ridge, the sight of smoke curling from the chimney and the neat yard below nearly broke him with relief. As they rode in, Lila stepped from the house, shielding her eyes against the setting sun. The smile that lit her face at the sight of him banished every weary mile. "Welcome home," she called, hurrying down the steps. Home. The word had never sounded sweeter. "Everything all right here?" he asked, dismounting, suddenly shy. "Perfect. The garden's thriving," and Mateo patched the roof. She hesitated, then confessed, "I missed you." The simple truth struck him deeper than any bullet. "I missed you too." Their eyes locked, and Grant knew then he couldn't keep pretending. Whatever had grown between them had to be spoken, no matter the risk. "Lila," he began, but she shook her head. "Not now. You're worn out. Supper's waiting, and I drew hot water for your bath." Frustrated, but knowing she was right, he let it go. Later, after the best meal he'd had in weeks, and reports from Mateo on the ranch's affairs, he found himself alone with her on the porch. The summer night was warm stars scattered like silver dust across the wide Wyoming sky. Lila Monroe broke the comfortable silence. "You said before you wanted to talk about arrangements." Grant Dawson drew in a steadying breath. "Yes, but not the way you think." She turned cautious. "Before I left, I realized something. These past months with you here, the ranch hasn't felt this way since Annabelle died. It feels like a home again." Her eyes softened. "I'm glad. It's more than that." Restless, he stood. "I've been thinking about what you told me, that you feared losing me. The truth is, I'm afraid too. Afraid of feeling again. Last time nearly destroyed me when I lost them." Lila rose close enough that he could see her pulse beating fast at her throat. "I know fear, Grant. I left everything behind back east because I was more afraid of staying than of starting new. And now, yes, I'm still afraid, but not of the same things." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Afraid of wanting something I can't have. Afraid of caring for someone who sees me only as his housekeeper." Grant's heart pounded. "Is that what you think, that I see you only as help?" "What else would I think? You've kept your distance, careful not to." He closed that distance in a single step, cupping her face in his calloused hands. "I've been careful because I'm terrified, Lila. Not of caring for you, that happened no matter what I did, but of losing you, of opening my heart only to have it torn apart again." Her eyes widened, hope flaring. "You care for me?" she asked. "More than care. Every mile on the trail, all I thought of was getting back, not to the ranch, not to the house. To you." A smile trembled across her lips. "I thought of you every day, worried for your safety. Wondered if you thought of me." I did, he whispered, thumb tracing her cheek. Every day, every night. What does this mean for us, Grant? He drew in a deep breath. It means I'm asking you to stay. Not as my housekeeper. His voice shook with the weight of it, but as my wife, if you'll have me. Joy broke across her face like sunrise. Are you certain I don't want you to feel bound by that advertisement? This isn't about obligation. It's about the fact that I've fallen in love with you, Lila Monroe. Her voice trembled. Then yes. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll be your wife. He kissed her, then a kiss that felt like coming home after years of wandering, her arms twined around his neck, her body fitting perfectly against his. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, he rested his forehead to hers. I never thought I'd feel this again. Never thought I deserved to. Everyone deserves love, Grant, even those who've lost it before. In her words, he felt both forgiveness and hope. The next morning, they rode into Clearwater to see Reverend Nathaniel Burke about the wedding. By afternoon, word was all over town the widower Dawson was marrying the mail-order bride. Most folks approved. Grant had been alone too long, and Miss Monroe seemed the right kind of woman. 3 weeks later, the Double B was alive with celebration. Lanterns hung from the cottonwoods tables overflowed with food prepared by Rosa Delgado, and the ranch wives' wildflowers brightened every corner. Lila wore a simple ivory gown, her hair crowned with summer blossoms. As she walked toward him, Grant felt the broken pieces of his life finally fitting into something whole again. I take you, Lila Monroe, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he vowed, voice steady despite the lump in his throat. To have and to hold for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. I take you, Grant Dawson, she answered through shining tears, to be my husband, to love and to cherish from this day forward till death do us part. Their kiss sealed it, and cheers rose around them. The celebration lasted late into the night, with fiddles dancing and laughter beneath the stars. Later, alone on the porch of what was now truly their home, Grant held her close. Happy? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Completely, she whispered. Though I still can't believe it. If you hadn't placed that ad, if I hadn't answered if you'd sent me back, as if you would have gone, he chuckled. True. She smiled. The moment I stepped off that train, I knew I belonged here. I just didn't know why yet. Now I do. I belong with you. That's all that matters. As seasons turned, the Double B thrived under their partnership. Lila proved herself sharp with numbers, and management offering ideas that boosted the ranch's success. Grant sought her counsel in every decision, big and small. Their first Christmas together was simple but sweet. He gave her a leather journal for her writing. She gifted him a pocket watch engraved with their initials and wedding date. Something to remember me by when you ride the next cattle drive, she teased. As if I could forget you for a moment, he said, pulling her close. Winter passed in warmth and contentment. At night she read aloud by the fire while he carved small wooden figures, a hobby she'd encouraged. Spring brought calves to the pasture chutes in the garden and unexpected news that filled them with wonder. Are you certain? Grant asked, stunned. Her voice was barely more than a whisper when Lila Monroe shared the secret she'd been carrying. The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday, she said, her face glowing with joy. We're going to have a baby, Grant. Late autumn. For a moment, Grant Dawson could only stare. Then he pulled her into his arms, overcome with emotion. Fatherhood stolen from him once now returned through this second chance at love. It was almost too much to grasp. Are you happy? She asked, searching his silence. Beyond words, he murmured against her hair. But God help me, I'm terrified too. She understood at once. because of what happened before. He nodded, unable to speak the names Anna, Belle, Noah, without the fear clawing back at him. "Listen to me," Lila said firmly, cradling his face between her palms. "What happened then was tragedy, yes, but it wasn't your fault. And it doesn't mean it will happen again. I couldn't bear to lose you," he rasped. "You won't. We'll do everything right this time. Dr. Elias Crane says I'm strong and healthy. We'll face whatever comes together. That's what marriage means, Grant." Her certainty steadied him. Through the summer and into fall, he watched with wonder as her body changed, carrying their child. Despite his lingering fear, joy slowly outweighed it. He built a cradle with his own hands, readied the nursery beside their room, and spent long evenings with Lila talking about names. The months passed without trouble. Lila stayed healthy, though Rosa Delgado helped more with household chores, and Grant hired a young woman from town to ease her load. As the leaves turned and the air cooled, anticipation filled the Double B. What had begun as a desperate act born of loneliness had become the heart of his happiness. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing he'd built for her, her head resting on his shoulder and his hand spread across her rounded belly, she asked softly, "What are you thinking?" "How lucky I am," he said simply. She smiled and covered his hand with hers. "I think we found each other at just the right time. Their son was born on a crisp October night. Labor was long, but steady." Grant paced the hallway, whispering prayers and curses in turn, while her cries cut through him. When Dr. Crane finally stepped out, his grin said it all. "Congratulations, Mr. Dawson. You've got a healthy son, and your wife is doing fine." Grant's knees nearly gave way. "Can I see them?" "Of course. They're waiting." The sight he beheld would never leave him. Lila exhausted, but radiant pillows propping her up, a small bundle nestled in her arms. "Come meet your son," she whispered. Grant sat carefully beside her, breath catching, as he looked down at the tiny face framed with dark hair. "He's perfect," Grant whispered, touching a tiny hand that curled instinctively around his finger. "What shall we name him?" Lila asked. They'd spoken of names, but left the choice for this moment. Grant swallowed hard. "What about Wyatt?" "After your father." Her eyes filled. "Wyatt Dawson. It's perfect." As he held his son for the first time, Grant felt the last shadows of grief ease their grip. There would always be space in his heart for Annabelle and Noah, but his life now belonged to Lila and Wyatt, to the family they were building. 2 years later, their daughter Clara was born, completing what they hadn't known was missing. The Double B grew with them. Grant expanded the acreage, improved the herd, and built a reputation for some of the finest cattle in the territory. Lila, meanwhile, opened a small school on the ranch, teaching not just their own children, but the children of nearby families and hands. They faced hard times, droughts, bitter winters, and disputes over water rights, but always faced them together. Their partnership only grew stronger. On their 10th anniversary, Grant surprised Lila with a trip to San Francisco, the farthest either had traveled since Wyoming. They marveled at the ocean's endless horizon, at the bustle of the city, and reveled in 2 weeks of time together. One moonlit night, standing on the balcony of their hotel, Grant held her close. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. She turned in his arms, her face glowing in the silver light. "Not one. Every step led me here, to you, to our children, to the life we've built." He kissed her, pouring a decade of gratitude into it. "When I placed that advertisement," he said against her lips, "I never imagined this." "What did you imagine?" she teased. "A practical arrangement. Someone to keep house. Maybe companionship." He shook his head, still in awe. "Instead, I found everything I didn't know I needed. She smiled, eyes shimmering. So did I. More than I ever dared dream. When they returned to the Double B, their children ran to greet them, the ranch alive with the home they'd built together. Grant thought of the winding, unlikely road that had led him here, and knew he wouldn't change a single step. Grant Dawson once believed love had passed him by for good, that his heart had been too scarred to risk again. How wrong he'd been. Love hadn't ended with loss. It had simply waited patient as the prairie wind for the right time to return. And in Lila Monroe and in the family they had built together, he discovered not just a second chance, but a life fuller and richer than anything he had dared to dream. Evening settled over the Double B, the ranch quiet with Wyatt and Clara already asleep upstairs. Grant and Lila sat side by side on the porch swing, watching fireflies rise and dance above the creek, just as they had on that summer night when their guarded hearts had first begun to soften. "Do you remember telling me about the fireflies?" Lila asked, resting her head against his shoulder. "I remember everything," Grant admitted softly. "The way the light caught your hair, and how afraid I was of what I was starting to feel for you." Her laugh was gentle, touched with memory. And now, he pressed a kiss to her temple. "Now I thank God every day for that fear, because pushing through it brought me here. To you. To this life. To all of it." Hard to believe it started with nothing more than a newspaper advertisement. A few lines of print that changed everything, she said. "No," Grant corrected gently, his voice steady. "It started with courage. Yours when you came west into the unknown, and mine when I dared to open my heart again after believing it was gone for good. The advertisement was only the spark." Stars glimmered across the Wyoming sky as Grant held her closer, his chest full of a peace he once thought forever lost. From grief to hope, from loneliness to belonging, their road together had be. The wounded cowboy and the mail-order bride had found in one another not just the partnership they'd once sought, but the healing, passionate love their souls had ached for. In the home they built, surrounded by children, and the land they tended, they had created something rare, a